Resolution 2021.32, denouncing anti-Asian American Pacific Islander sentiment in any form. Whereas Asian or Pacific Islander encompasses all of the Asian continent and the Pacific Islands of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. And
Whereas in Santa Clara County, one of the first minority majority counties in the nation, Asians have been the largest racial group since 2014, and currently Asians make up nearly 38% of the county's population.
Whereas according to the 2019 U.S. Census Bureau data, the city of Milpitas has a population of 84,196, of which 67.2% identified as Asian/Pacific Islander origin.
Whereas the use of anti-Asian Pacific Islander terminology and rhetoric related to COVID-19, such as the Chinese virus, Wuhan virus, and Kung flu, have perpetuated xenophobia and anti-Asian and Pacific Islander stigma.
Whereas, since January 2020, there has been a dramatic increase in reports of hate crimes and incidents against those of Asian and Pacific Islander descent in other parts of the country.
Whereas the increased use of anti-Asian and Pacific Islander rhetoric has resulted in Asian Americans being harassed, assaulted, and scapegoated during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Whereas the increased use of anti-Asian and Pacific Islander rhetoric has also resulted in Asian American businesses being targeted for vandalism and destruction.
Whereas on March 19, 2020, in response to the alarming escalation in xenophobia and bigotry resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, the Asian Pacific Planning and Policy Council, Chinese for Affirmative Action, and the Asian American Studies Department of San Francisco State University launched the Stop AAPI Hate Reporting Center to track and respond to incidents of hate, violence, harassment, discrimination, shunning, and child bullying against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States.
Whereas Stop AAPI Hate has reported more than 3,795 incidents of all hate that took place in the US since the onset of the pandemic, with over 700 incidents in the Bay Area alone.
Whereas on September 17, 2020, the United States of America House of Representatives passed a resolution sponsored by Representative Grace Meng to denounce COVID-19 racism toward Asian Americans.
Whereas on January 28, 2021, Vicha Ratanapakdi of San Francisco was brutally assaulted and fatally succumbed to the injuries sustained.
Whereas on February 3rd, 2021, Noel Quintana of New York City was violently attacked and slashed across the face with a box cutter on his way to work.
whereas on February 22, 2021, California legislature approved $1.4 million in funding that will pay for the study and documentation of xenophobia and hate crimes against Asian Americans amid the pandemic.
Whereas on March 16, 2021, Delana Ashley Yan, Paul Andre Michels, Xiaojia Tan, Zhao Yufeng, Soon-Si Park, Hyunjin Grant, Sensha Kim, and Yong Ira of Georgia were senselessly killed in a violent hate crime.
Whereas on March 17, 2021, Xiao Jinzi of San Francisco was brutally assaulted, but successfully was able to fend off her attacker until people came to her aid.
Whereas there have been no hate crimes against Milpitas community members or cyberbullying against students of Asian or Pacific Islander descent in MUSC, the district classified team members, certificated team members, and district leaders wish to affirm our commitment to building a culture of we to ensure that this continues to be a safe place for all to learn and work.
Whereas the governing board of the Milpitas Unified School District wishes to affirm its commitment to the well-being and safety of Asian American community members and ensure they know they're not alone and can speak out to help stop the spread of bigotry.
Whereas building a culture of we is about cultural sustainability and inclusion, and clubs such as Philippines United Student Organization, Korean American Student Association, Chinese Club, Vietnamese Student Association, Desi Union, Manava, Black Student Union, Latino Student Organization, True Colors, and more promote this amongst our student body.
Now, therefore be it resolved that the governing board of the Milpitas Unified School District denounce any and all anti-Asian and Pacific Islander sentiment in any form, recognizes that the health and safety of all Americans, no matter their background, must be of the utmost priority, and
condemns all manifestations of expressions in unison of
racism,
xenophobia,
discrimination,
anti-Asian American and Pacific Islander sentiment,
scapegoating,
and ethnic or religious intolerance.